I am Vanessa Joseph, and I'm a counselor here at Cumberland Counseling Centers, and I just so happen to be Haitian American.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Hesse, and I'm also a counselor at Cumberland Counseling Centers, and I just so happen to be Jamaican American. We want to make sure that as we get into this subject for today, that you know that this is a generalized presentation, so it may not be specific to your situation, but hopefully you'll get something and identify with something that we say today.
Also, you might even find that this applies to you outside of ethnicity. You might relate to this through generations. You might relate to this through your different sexualities and even different diagnoses that you experience in different abled communities. So, you might be wondering, why did they tell us their ethnicities? That's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about what it might be like to be a second-generation American and tackling mental health.
And so we want to start off with just a little funny story for me, a personal experience I had. I had a friend one time tell me that you're not Black. Funny, right? Instead, they said, you're Jamaican. Imagine my bewilderment. But they really identified me as Jamaican and not a Black American. And in the moment, of course, that did not throw me into a crisis, thank God. But it did cause me to sit back and realize that other people from other cultures identify me differently than I would identify myself. And it also showed me the difference between how my family identifies me and how my friends could identify me. So my friends identify me as a Black American, but when I go home to my mother and when I'm around family that is from Jamaica, they tell me I'm a Yankee. So to them, I am a American Yankee because I was born in New York and not Jamaica. But to people who were born here and my peers, I'm Jamaican. So I just thought that was really interesting how that there's a difference between how you're identified by the society you grew up in and then the family that you have at home.
Yeah. So what Christina's speaking to is the difference between nationality, ethnicity, race. And often these terms can get confusing because we use them quite interchangeably. In America, there's a bunch of different ethnicities, like the Gullah Geechee people in the East, or even Creole people down in Louisiana. In other countries, you might find the same thing. China has hundreds of ethnicities, Africa the same. And while many people might identify with being Black, which is a race, just as Asian or maybe Caucasian is a race, they also might identify with different ethnicities within that same racial group, or even nationality. Again, people in America who identify with being American also identify with different ethnic groups within our country. And then you add on immigrants and their children and their children's children. So we used to struggle with this ourselves. We used to call ourselves first-generation Americans because we thought, well, I am the first in my family to be born in the United States, when really immigrants who gain citizenship are the first-generation Americans in their family. They're both immigrants and first-generation Americans, whereas their children are second-generation Americans.
So we're getting a lot of messages here, and a lot of them mixed messages for the second generation American. We receive messages from society that tells us we're one thing, one way, belong to a specific group. And then we receive messages from our family that tells us that we're another way and we belong to this group. For me, it left me with a lot of questions. Am I Black? Am I Jamaican? Am I, you fill in the blank for you? As human beings, we want to belong somewhere. We always want to be a part of something. And so this kind of middle ground between two cultures, maybe more if you have a little bit more in your background, can be very challenging to navigate and very challenging on the journey to feeling accepted. When I asked one Ghanaian American what was the biggest challenge between in being a second generation American, the response was, you belong to two cultures or more, and yet you don't feel like you fit into either of them.
Yeah. So let's start with family. Our parents are the architects of our lives. They decide what they eat, and usually it's really good. They decide where we're going to go. They decide what we're going to wear. For the most part, this is good guidance. Then you begin to navigate yourself outside the world, and the code that your parents are giving you doesn't quite fit right. And you begin to distrust them because their advice, their guidance comes from a time and place that is no more. This creates a really big wedge between families sometimes, and it makes it hard for you to really depend on your parents. Some people even see their immigrant parents as, God forgive me, complete idiots because their advice is just not useful. And the reality is that the misunderstandings between parents who are immigrants, first-generation Americans, sometimes not even, creates a big misunderstanding because we just simply didn't grow up the same way. And you might find that your home, which was a source of comfort, is also a source of isolation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you bring up a very interesting point, Vanessa, that there's absolutely a difference in how we communicate at home as a second generation American and how we communicate and relate to the society around us in our daily lives, whether that's school or work. It makes it very difficult sometimes with what we get and the guidance we receive at home, and then the process of life in society. And so sometimes that can make for a very lonely existence for the second generation American. We can often feel like we're left to navigate the culture and how it operates all alone, or with very limited resources. An example of this, I remember going to college and trying to go through the process of applying for school. Only thing was, my mother never went to school here. And so I had to rely very heavily on my high school guidance counselor. I'm so grateful for him being able to walk me through the process, because otherwise I would have kind of been left to figure it out on my own, which would have caused a little more stress, anxiety, all the things in trying to be able to do a very daunting task, apply for college, where as opposed to someone who may have American parents that were born here, or older siblings that were born here, that could be able to be helpful for them.
Yes. And then that takes us right into siblings. The process of immigrating to a new land disrupts the flow of the family dynamics. For instance, a few of my clients talk a little bit about how even though they have older siblings, because those older siblings were born abroad and sometimes left behind for a short period of time, they, as a middle child, has taken the role of the family savior. A lot of times when we talk about birth order, firstborn children have these specific set of roles that we think and that we look into. Middle children have a second set of roles, and then the babies of the family have a completely different role altogether. And yet, when immigration's a part of the process, this can be completely flipped upside down, as you never know which child will thrive the best in this new community. You never really know who all gets to go with the first trip. And that completely changes things, which might lead to enmeshment, where a lot of the family members find that they need to rely on each other, depend on each other, and stick close to each other in order to thrive in this new land. Or a pulling away or avoidance when certain family members really thrive in the new land and feel like their family is holding them back from really prospering in the way that they imagine is best for them personally. With these modes of survival, it can bring on a lot of shame and guilt. Guilt, if you feel like maybe I should have helped my family more when I was younger, or even shame for identifying with people who may not be up to your standards according to the American way and expectations, or even guilt that you didn't take the opportunity to pull away earlier on and now finding yourself in a cycle that you just aren't really sure how to navigate. And then there's this whole idea of boundaries that's being tossed all over the internet. How do you set boundaries with people that you're enmeshed with? And how do you undo boundaries that you've set so early that now, even though you want to identify with your culture, you're having a hard time navigating yourself back into the language, back into the customs that you abandoned at such a young age?
Absolutely. And then when establishing relationships outside of the family, like those friendships, like those romantic relationships, it can feel like you have to become a chameleon. It can feel like you have to be one way with family and, family friends, and then you have to be another way when you go outside of your home. You have to know different terminologies. I can't tell you how many times my mother called a specific item in the grocery store one thing, and when we went to the grocery store, it was a completely different name. And so, imagine going out with your friends and telling them what you had for dinner last night, and you're using your family term, and they're looking at you like, huh? Mm-hmm. What's that? So having to kind of go back and forth between both cultures and knowing when to use what term and doing all the things. And then also being a translator at times. My mother, Jamaicans speak English. However, it can be a different dialect of English. And so understanding their accent and coupled with the sentence formations and all of that, yes, can be fun to navigate when you're sitting and they're talking to your friends and your friends are looking like deer in headlights and having to translate what your mother is trying to say, what your father is trying to say, can be very interesting. And so you're having to go back and forth between the two all the time and trying to be well-versed in two cultures. And sometimes this can be a little fun and be a place where you can laugh about it. And then sometimes it can become a little exhausting because you're trying to understand everyone while at times feeling like no one understands you.
I definitely relate, Christina. There's a bunch of words in Creole that I tried to use Google Translate to find, and I think I'll never find them. I think that they're just stuck in their language. So now for the good part. Yes. For many of us, our life partners is the person that we've been searching forever for. And even studies show that your life partner is a big component about how your life will turn out. They impact the choices that you make, like your lifestyle, how many children you'll have. Even your economic status is determined by the partner that you choose. However, the way that we connect with that person can be altogether confusing already if you speak the same language, come from the same neighborhood, and already have all the same experiences. Imagine throwing in a different set of customs that you have to navigate. And remember, it's not just them fitting into your world. They would also love for you to fit into their world. And yet, as you're growing up and your parents are showing you and telling you about what kinds of things to look for in this partner, they may say, doctor, lawyer, engineer, or they're no good. And yet, the world is not made of just doctors, lawyers, and engineers. You might find that you love is this really, really sweet artist that now you're concerned about bringing home to your parents because you're not really sure if they'll truly approve. Or even vice versa. You may find that your parents really like this set of people or this group of people for you, and yet you yourself just have never found yourself able to get along. This can be emotionally, socially, and mentally draining and hard to navigate. And yet, it's something that many of us are navigating now.
Yeah. Along those same lines, when you start thinking about lifestyle and career, a lot of times your family has expectations for you that conflict with your personal desires and dreams. Your family wants you to have a plan. Your plan needs to include education. I know in my family, education was a big deal and it was emphasized to get your education. And so education, and then it was career and family. And so in this time, in this day and age, a lot of times, especially young adults, they're dreamers. They have desires and things that may go outside of the plans and expectations of their first generation parents. Yeah. And that can be very difficult to navigate because now you are going outside of the plan and perspective of success that your family has, as opposed to kind of what you've been taught. Go with your heart. What do you desire when you go outside of the home? And so you're pressured to succeed because a lot of first generation parents, they came to America really to make a better life for themselves and for their future family. And so now there's an expectation and maybe even an unspoken pressure for the second generation child to meet expectations and to honor the sacrifice of their first generation parent. And so when you are faced with the external conflict of going back and forth with your parents sometimes as to what your dreams are, what your desires are, and what their expectation is for you, and then also the internal conflict of, am I honoring the sacrifice of my parents? Am I making them proud of me? Yeah. That can be a very difficult and challenging place to navigate. And again, oftentimes feeling a little lonely because the very people that you look to for support, you feel like you may be disappointing. And so it can be very difficult to kind of navigate and deal with the stress and the anxiety that comes along with lifestyle and career choices as a second generation American.
Absolutely. And a lot of times this is not black or white. It's not follow my parents' dream or follow the dream that I have in my heart. Mm-hmm. The reality is that for many of us, our parents are being very practical. They didn't grow up on Disney Channel movies that said to follow your heart and everything will be well. They're just looking at the reality of the situation. They themselves had dreams that they had to let go to ensure a better future for themselves. And they're afraid that the emotionality of a new culture is completely taking over their children. A lot of us opt for cutting off our parents, but many, I would even think that most of us don't dream of completely cutting off our connection to our roots and our culture, and yet it's so hard to navigate such high emotions when it comes to survival, which is job and seeking for security, and finding something that's suitable for our mental and emotional well-being. So, when any of these things become too burdensome, from language to the way that we connect with our parents, to even our own siblings, romantic relationships, jobs, careers, it's time to consider therapy. And I know what you're thinking. For this specific population, why would therapy be the option? We've already been told that we're too smart, too great, too confusing, too hard to understand for anybody. This is the exact group of people that has every reason to think that therapy is the last thing that will help them. They must muscle through just like their parents did, or find their own way like their fellow classmates have. And yet, this might be the thing that's holding you back. For most of us, we come from cultures where there were sages, wise men, elders, that our collective communities went back to for support during times of extreme duress. In our country, in the year 2025, that's called a counselor. And this might be the awesome opportunity that you can take to seek one out that can best suit your needs. It might be a little foreign to your parents, but even they went to a wise person at some point in their life and got to where they are today. I think it's important for you to consider what's best for you in this context so that you can live a peaceful life that is meaningful and enriching for your future.
Yeah. Hopefully by now you've heard something that you've already identified with. We just want to go over some very general symptoms of things that you may be experiencing that you may not even know what word to put to it, what term to put to it. So if you're challenged with that overachievement of feeling like you constantly have to succeed at something to make sure, again, that you are honoring your parents' sacrifice. And along those lines, if you're experiencing burnout that can be characterized by persistent exhaustion or decreased motivation or detached emotionally, this is also something that you might want to consider to bring to therapy. Feeling emotionally stuck, feeling like you are constantly in this place that you just can't get out of, or anxiety. Feeling like you can't control your worry, feeling like you're restless or you're fatigued or you're having difficulty concentrating, or maybe it's depression. You're feeling sad all the time or feeling this sense of emptiness and hopelessness. These are all things that we would love to sit with you and hold space for you, and just sit and listen and be that ear that you don't have to hide from your emotions. You don't have to suppress them at all, but you can come and sit with two friendly faces and be able to start your journey of healing.
Yeah,